I'm an entrepreneur, right? No doubt about it, right? Everyone that will see me will say, "Oh, this guy is an entrepreneur for sure."
Serial
Right?
entrepreneur, yes.
But I'm also a teacher. So I feel equally rewarded if I build stuff myself or I guide someone to build it. I don't even call those pivot, right? So for me, you know, the definition of a startup is this is the value proposition and this is the target audience, right? If you change one of them, it's pivot. But usually what happens is that you try and error. Look, building a startup is a journey that I can describe in multiple dimensions. So if you do not figure out product market fit, you will die, as simple as that. You never heard of a company that did not figure out product market fit.
Welcome to Venture Ahead, IE University's entrepreneurship podcast. I am Samantha Zorn, an MBA student.
I am Valeria Salgado, a BBA student.
And we're your hosts for today, our first episode. We're very excited to have Uri Levine with us here today.
Uri Levine is a double unicorn founder. He founded the companies Waze and Moovit, who were exited to Google and Intel for $1 billion. And nowadays, they have more than 700 million users globally. And today, we're happy to have you with us here, also celebrating your book launch in Spanish, Enamórate del problema, no de la solución.
We will start with the first question that we will do this question for every guest that we have. And a question that we were thinking, and it's important for you to answer, is that what is one thought or phrase that you think and gets you motivated in the morning?
You know, I always look into the future, and I believe that today is going to be better than yesterday, and tomorrow is going to be better than today. And I think that we're going to have a brighter future.
Perfect. I thought it was going to be fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
That's not the first thing that comes to my mind in the morning.
No, that's a great answer. I love it.
So, Yuri, you mentioned the word problem throughout all your book. And in some way, such a terrible word doesn't have a negative connotation, rather than a positive one. So basically, you have romanticized it. And we can see that from the beginning of your book. Like in the cover, it says, fall in love with a problem, which is actually, in my opinion, a little romantic as well. So saying that the problem is actually one of the main aspects that you have to solve as an entrepreneur and the beginning of your journey. How do you identify a big problem worth solving?
So you're right. When at the end of the day, entrepreneurship journey is about value creation. The simplest way to create value is solve a problem. That's the simplest way, right? So this is, if you solve a problem, it's guaranteed that you are creating value. But when you focus on the problem is going to serve as the North Star of your journey. And when you have a North Star, you're going to make less deviation of the course and more likely to become successful. But I think that the most powerful part of it is that the story that you're about to tell is way more compelling. Just imagine that we will be here in 2007, and for a second I would not even try to figure out how old you were back then. But imagine 2007, just before I started Waze, and I'm going to tell you, oh, I'm going to build an AI crowdsource-based navigation system. And you're going to say, oh yeah, very interesting. But you don't care. If I will tell you I'm going to help you to avoid traffic jams, then you do care. And when your customer care about your mission, they want you to be successful. And when they want you to be successful, they are going to help you to become successful. So when you fall in love and remain focused on the problem, you simply increase the likelihood of being successful. But by and large, how do you validate that the problem is worth solving?
That was my question.
Think of a problem, a big problem, something that it's worth solving, and then ask yourself, so who has this problem? Now, if you happen to be the only person on the planet with this problem, then I would say, you know what, I can recommend you a therapist. Way cheaper and faster than building a startup. But if a lot of people have this problem, what you really want to do next is go and speak with those people and understand their perception of the problem. And only then go and build a solution. Now, if you follow this path and your solution works, it's guaranteed that you are creating value. But if you start with the solution, you might be building something that no one cares. Now, occasionally people will ask me, so how many people do I need to speak with? And I will tell them 100. Now, you don't really need 100. You need way less. But if I tell you 100, then you start to think about, okay, I need to speak with people that I don't know. These are the most important people, because otherwise you're going to speak with your family and they're always going to support you, and best friends, and they're going to tell you, oh, yeah, you should do that and so forth. But when you speak with people that you don't know, you start to get the real answers. And those real answers are going to tell you whether or not you should follow this path or not. And by the way, if you speak with someone, you describe the problem to them, and they will tell you, oh, I know someone that has this problem, this is not good. This is basically means that I don't have this problem.
It has to be a unique problem.
No, it doesn't have to be a unique. But if they actually do have the problem, then it's going to sound completely different. They will tell you, no, 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 this is not the problem. The problem is, and they will give you their version of the problem. When this happened, this is what you want to do.
And honestly, I completely agree with that, because you need to talk to people that are unbiased to your situation. And then you need to ask them for feedback and understand the feedback that you're telling you, so you can actually find the real problem that they have. So you can then start adapting your ideas to finally build a product or a service in some way that is gonna solve the problem that they have and adapt to the real user's needs. So
Exactamente.
but for that, it's a very long journey, right? You have to pivot and pivot and pivot and start pivoting until then one day you're gonna, because with each step that you take, you're gonna finally reach that end goal. So what are your thoughts on pivoting and failure? Like, do they go hand in hand?
So I don't even call those pivot, right? So for me, you know, the definition of a startup is this is the value proposition and this is the target audience, right? And this is the startup, right? If you change one of them, it's pivot. But usually what happens is that you try and error. Look, building a startup is a journey that I can describe in multiple dimensions, right? The first one is going to be a roller coaster journey with ups and downs and ups and downs. And look, all businesses in the world have ups and downs, but the frequency of those when you're building startup, way higher. And I think that I heard the best quote on that from Ben Horowitz. Ben Horowitz is one of the founders of Andreessen Horowitz venture capital firm, and before that, he used to be a CEO of a startup. And he was asked whether or not he was sleeping well at night as a CEO of a startup. And he said, oh, yeah, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried. Right? So this is the reality of the roller coaster journey, but it's also a journey of failures. Because we're trying to build something new that no one did before, and we think that we know exactly what we're doing, but the reality is that we don't. So we try one thing and it doesn't work, we try another thing and it doesn't work. We keep on trying multiple things until we find one thing that does work. Now, if you realize that this is going to be a journey of failures, then there are two immediate conclusions. The first one is that if you're afraid to fail, then in reality you already failed because you're not going to try. Albert Einstein used to say that if you haven't failed, that's because you haven't tried new things before. If we are going to try new things, we will fail. The second one is that you want to fail fast, because when you fail fast, you still have plenty of time to try another attempt and another approach and another version of the product and another version of the product. So what you call pivoting is just iterations of the product until you figure out product market fit. And product market fit is about value creation, right? That means that you create value to your customers. So if you do not figure out product market fit, you will die, as simple as that. You never heard of a company that did not figure out product market fit.
I would guess my question, now that we're in the failure theme, I know that it's very easy to say that failure should be redirection, but once you're there, it's very different. I wanted to know if you could tell us about a personal story and your first failure and how that shaped you to think about a problem or a failure in that way.
So I grew up at the house that I was encouraged to fail, which is kind of rare, right?
That's
because I would
impressive.
come to my dad with a crazy idea, and he would know that it's not going to work, and he will still say, "Why don't you give it a try?" Right? And the most important part is what happened after that, right? So obviously I failed; it didn't work, and after that there was no judgment. So if you want to build a DNA, a culture of no fear of failure, then the most important part is what do you do when there are failures? And usually he would ask me, okay, so what have we learned, right? And that two things happens, right? So number one, you learn, and number two, you become stronger, because every time that you get up stronger. One of the things that you've learned is that if you fail, you can still get up, right?
Yes.
And look, and this is really important, right? Because if you try something and it doesn't work, you go back into exactly the same place that you were before you tried that, right? Exactly the same place.
Correct.
And when you realize that this is the alternative cost of the failure, then it's okay to fail, right? So you try, it doesn't work, you go back to the square one, you try something else. If you live your life this way, then you are going to find out what makes you happy. You are going to find out what makes you successful. And if you're afraid to fail, then you remain in your comfort zone, and you'll never figure that out.
Yes, I heard a quote that said failure is a mindset. So I really feel that it's resonating here. And also like staying in the theme about your childhood, I think I'm very like interested in knowing how your childhood shaped you to be an entrepreneur and to have these entrepreneurships. Do you think it had a lot to do in that way, or was it more of a learned experience that made you the entrepreneur and success that you are today?
The challenge with these questions is then let's say that I have a very unique childhood that made me an entrepreneur, right? Which is possible. But if you didn't, then what does it mean for you, right? So if you did not have the same childhood, so
Agreed.
is that means that you cannot be a successful entrepreneur?
Mm.
And so for a second, I would say this is less important how you were raised up. What is really important, what are the key learnings, and whether or not you can implement them today, right? So I was troublemaker. And this is part of being an entrepreneur, is that you challenge everything. You don't accept anything for granted. Now, do I guarantee people to become troublemaker? No, if it fits your personality, then that's fine. But if it doesn't, then don't.
Actually, I have a younger sister. She's right now 12, and she's the troublemaker of my family. She has a very strong personality, and she's also very strong opinionated. But one of the main things that she has is that since she was very little, she has been very good at communicating, because at just doing things, because she doesn't sit around waiting to be told on what to do. She just does it. So, for example, when she was 9, she wanted a hamster. So she basically did a PowerPoint presentation on why my parents should buy her a hamster. And my parents said no. So then a few days later, they went to the farm, and then the professor called my parents saying that she saw her putting a bunny inside of her backpack. And then she was like, and they were just like, oh, are you trying to steal a bunny? Of course, my sister is young. She's very nice. But the point about this is that she's always been very good at communicating. That's one of the points that you mentioned in your book, the storytelling. So what's actually the power of a storytelling?
So number one, if you want people to engage with your journey and your mission, then you need to tell them an engaging story. Otherwise, they're not going to engage, right? And this is true for the team that you are going to recruit, and investors that you are going to recruit, and customers and users and so forth. And the best way to do that is through telling a good story. And good story is not about facts, right? So people would like to think, okay, I'm going to put more facts, and this is how I'm going to convince people. No, good story is about creating emotional engagement. So what you really want is that you want the audience to believe or to think or to want to be part of the story. And so the story needs to be compelling. It needs to have, in general, I would say it needs to be authentic, right? Story. Now, if you don't have an authentic story and you need to make up one, then made it up with a lot of details. Details may create authenticity. And you have to learn how to tell a good story, because otherwise people don't engage, and then they don't care. And you want them to care.
Do you want them to connect and say,
Exactly.
like, that can happen to me as well, or to someone that I know?
Look,
Right?
in particular, when it comes to fundraising, then I spoke with many investors that invested in startups in the early days, right? So first investment into the company. And I asked them why. Why did you decide to invest in this startup and this startup and this startup? And I heard two things, only two things. I like the CEO, I like the story. Now, CEO is obvious, right? But in order to be liked, then CEO needs to go alone to the meeting, right? Because you want the entire headlight on you. You don't want other distractions. You want to be there by yourself. The other part is that you need to learn how to tell a good story. If you don't know how to tell a good story, then you will not be able to engage team member. You will not be able to engage investors. You will not be able to engage customers and so forth. Learn how to tell a good story.
I love that. And me, like now pivoting the conversation, I'm an MBA student, so I want to go a little bit more on the business side. Um, I want to know what's the story. I know I've seen it around too, and I've heard you talk before, but what's the story behind Waze? What is the problem you fell in love with? And it might seem a little bit obvious right now because it's, finding place A to place B, but like what was the problem you saw and how did you fall in love with that problem?
Look, end of the day, most of the problems that entrepreneurs are trying to address starting from their own perspective, right? So, and I hate traffic jams. Simple as that. I hate
We all
traffic
do.
jams. We all do, right? And this is why the engagement was easy, right? Because
Correct.
eventually, what we told people is that we are going to help you to avoid traffic jams. The reality is that if you look at people today and you ask them what is the greatest what is the greatest value that Waze creates for you, it's not about saving time. It's about creating certainty. So to a certain extent, I would say saving time is great value. Certainty is higher value. And you know exactly how long it's going to take you to get to your destination, which is really, really valuable. But when we started, we thought about, okay, we're going to help you to avoid traffic jams. We're going to help you to find the fastest route, and this is it. Now that remains true from the first day until today, right? Until obviously through the day of the acquisition. But we ended up with focusing on that, right? So the target audience were the daily commuters, and the value proposition was that we're going to help you to find the fastest route to your daily commute.
Google Maps existed during that time, correct? So how did you differentiate your problem from that? How were you going to provide value in your head, and how did you get to that solution with already having a platform that was doing kind of a similar thing?
So if you ask people that are using Waze how often they use Waze, they will tell you every day.
No, me too. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm a Waze user.
Me too.
If you ask people that are using Google Maps how often they use Google Maps, they will tell you when I need it.
Sí.
And so the use case is different, right? Daily commute we create certainty and save time on the daily commute. Different use case versus Google Maps. Waze does not help taxi drivers, does not help truck drivers, does not help pedestrians, does not help public transportation. This is
Correct.
Moovit. This is completely different, right?
Mhm.
And so the focus on the target audience and the value proposition create the separations or differentiation between Waze and Google Maps and everyone else, right? Now, if you will try to use Waze for pedestrian mode, this is not a good idea. It's not good for it. It's good for only one purpose, and it does that way better than anyone else.
Agreed. And on the certainty side, I understand and I know I use Waze. It's about how customers input the data. How do you rely on that on being certain?
So most of the data, so Waze crowdsource everything, right?
Yes.
Traffic information, speed cams, also the map data itself.
Correct.
But for a second, I would say the most important part or the most significant contribution is that when you drive, we know where you are and we know how fast you're going. And based on that, we know if there are traffic jams there or not. So
Correct.
even without active participation, we would know where traffic jams are.
Awesome.
And
Yeah.
the result is that this is being done automatically, and the more users that we have, obviously the data become more accurate. And the result is that there are more people that are joining so this is the flywheel of Waze.
Agreed.
The crowdsourcing, the general rule of crowdsourcing is that you can rely on active participations for limited data. The traffic information is not active participation, it's passive participation. So Waze has 3 levels, right? Active participation, reactive participations, and automatic. Automatic is when you drive, we collect the GPS data. Based on that, we know where traffic jams are and what turns are allowed and so forth. Active is when you report something, and reactive is when you say thumb up, yes, it's still there. The speed trap is still there.
Awesome.
So that is reaffirmation or reconfirmation of the data that is being collected.
And honestly, it's very interesting how Waze literally started with a blank map and just all the enthusiasts who wanted to create that map just did it and drove around their cars and be like, okay, I'm the first one to become part of this new movement in some way. But you also said that disruption is not technology, but changing the behavior of the people. So can you delve a little bit more into that?
So you're right. When we speak about disruption, then we are looking into changing the market equilibrium, changing the behavior of the people. And I'll give you a very simple example. Everyone is using Gmail today.
Yeah.
Before that, and we don't remember, you might not remember that, but before that, we used to pay money to have a mailbox, right? So we have an internet service provider that we pay them in order to have access and additional money to have a mailbox. And then Google introduced Gmail. At the beginning, it was not good enough, but iteration became good enough and free. The disruption was not because of Gmail is better. It was free. So price disruption is dramatically changing the world way faster than anything else. Waze is free. Yes. Before that, we actually used to pay money in order to have a navigation system, whether or not it was a GPS device, right, like TomTom or Garmin or whatever it is, or it was an app, right? There were apps.
Or a map.
Or maps, right? But people, we used to pay money in order to have this app. And Waze was free. And the major disruption is that it was a price-based. Now, what happened when you disrupt the market, and this is where it's becoming really interesting, the new market is dramatically bigger than the previous one. Before Waze, there were very few people that had navigation. And today, everyone is driving with an app, right? Whether or not it's Waze or Google Maps or Here We Go or Apple Maps or whatever it is, but everyone is driving with an app, right? So the disruption, the market today is so way bigger than before. Even if you think of Uber, for example, right? So all the taxi drivers in the world hate Uber, right? But the reality is that today there are 10 times more on-demand trips than before Uber, right? In the 10 times bigger market, there is room for Uber and Lyft and Bolt, and there's 3 times bigger market for taxi drivers. So the reality is that disruption basically creates change in the demand in most cases, which dramatically increase the size of the market. And then there is room for everyone. The challenge of disruption is that usually when you look at the disruptors, they are newcomers. They are the ones that have nothing to lose. And very interesting perspective would be, so what was the point of view of the disrupted market, right? How can they not see that coming, right? So how can Netflix goes to Blockbuster and ask them to acquire them twice? And they say no. And today, Blockbuster, I heard that there are still 4 branches in Alaska, but that's about it.
Oh, really?
Right? That's what I heard. I'm not sure. I haven't been there. Right? When Apple came out with the first iPhone, Microsoft was in a position of being the market leader for smartphones, right? They had the Windows mobile operating system that was running on Nokia and Motorola and Samsung and every device out there, right? And what Steve Ballmer, back then the CEO of Microsoft, said, you look at the iPhone and say, that will never work, right? In different forms, right? So no one is going to pay $400 for a device, right? He was right. People are paying today $1,500 for a device.
We're paying triple.
So usually the incumbent vendors cannot disrupt, and they cannot see disruption happen. And the most important thought about disruption is that the opportunity is way bigger than the threat, because the new market is dramatically bigger than the previous market.
Now we're going to go to a section that it's called Entrepreneur's Inbox.
The Entrepreneur's Inbox is a place where we get questions from our students and from our listeners. This is the first time we're trying this out, so we're very excited to try it out with you. Our first question is, what are some problems you believe are important to take a look at today so we can work on that?
So as it turns out, people fall in love with the problem that they like, right? And it's not necessarily the same one, right? So even if I would think that there is a problem worth solving, you need to fall in love with that, right? And it's better if you pick up your own problems, right? Something that you have faced, something that makes you upset, something that making you frustrated. That the starting point is going to be, oh, wait a minute, I really want to solve that.
Perfect.
And the next question is, how do you sustain a business without charging your users?
So look, at the end of the day, a business needs to make money, right? They're in consumer services. At the end of the day, there are only three business models. Number one, user pays. Right? That's the simplest one. And we pay to have Netflix, right? Or when we have Uber ride, then we pay to have a ride. Number two is advertisement,
Partnership.
right? So Waze is doing advertisement. Google is, Gmail is free, right? But you get ads. And Facebook is free, but you get ads, right? And so the advertisement model requires two critical part of it. One is that, or actually three. So number one, a lot of users. Number two, high frequency of use. And number three, long duration of use, right? So you watch YouTube and there is enough time that you will actually have an advertisement there. But if I would add advertisement to WhatsApp, this is going to be really frustrating. Right? Every time before I read a message, I need to see something. And so the duration of the use is short. You cannot have advertisement based on that. So if you have a lot of users, high frequency of use and long durations, advertisement is probably your best business model. If you have short durations of use, then actually monetizing the data itself is probably the best approach.
Thank you so much for being here with us. You can find us in all platforms available, and don't forget to subscribe to listen to more amazing podcasts. Thank you.
Thank you, Uri.
Thank you, Uri.
Thank you.